Welcome everybody. And thank you for joining us today as we discuss navigating the virtual marketplace. It's a webinar that we have here to present to you. I want to thank, though, the National Association Board of Directors, especially our presiding elder, Pastor Cliff McDowell, as well as our CODO, Chucky Myricks, for partnering with us. The Empowerment Generation Development Corporation, that's the governing body of the Joshua generation. And we are here to just spend some time with you today. Our goal is to empower you to make strategic decisions around the execution of your career development. And we've got a wonderful panel here today to help you make those strategic choices and execute on your plan to navigate this virtual marketplace. So how the flow is going to go today is we're going to spend about an hour with you. There'll be lots of questions and answers. If you'd like to participate, ask a question, please use the question and the answer queue versus the chat. We don't want your questions to get lost in the chat. So we're going to start today by introducing our esteemed panel. And first up is Eric Marquardt. And Eric is a member of the Empowerment Generation Development Board and also a longtime member of the National Association. He is leading the supply chain management virtual team at Ford Motor Company. So Eric, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Good afternoon, everybody. So as Izetta said, I'm one of our supply chain managers, and we support North US and Canadian depots, and our responsibility is basically ensuring that parts get from point A to point B when you take your car in to get serviced. So we interface with suppliers globally as well as locally. I have team members in India as well as team members in Dearborn, Michigan. And we have been, since the pandemic, we've actually been 100% virtual since March of last year. And looks like going forward, that will probably be the permanent option. So this virtual marketplace is not going anywhere. It looks like it's going to be a permanent part of how we do business. And I've been interviewed and also interviewed during the pandemic.
Great, thank you. Next up, if you'll take yourself off mute, is Micah Meekins. Micah is a recent 2020 graduate of Harvard University, and she's going to tell you a little bit about what she's been doing since graduating.
Hello, everybody. So like you said, my name's Micah. I'm 23 years old. I just graduated college last year. I studied applied math, and I have a minor in African American studies. I now work in sales strategy at a tech company called Axon. At this company, mostly what I do is the execs at our company have ideas about how to boost ROI, and I'll take these ideas. I'll see if they will produce a positive enough return on investment. And if that happens, I'll build all the framework to start this project, move it along, and then work on other ideas that our execs have.
Sounds good. Thank you. Next, we have Evan Marquardt. Evan is a very recent 2021 graduate of the University of Chicago. So tell us what you're doing, Evan.
Absolutely. So like you said, my name is Evan Marquardt. I recently graduated with a degree in public policy with a focus on urban policy and development. So work-wise, I'm currently working at HSBC, which is a multinational bank, and I work in the commercial banking sector. So basically what that means is we serve as essentially the private banker to corporations. So they'll come to us with whatever kind of needs they have as far as lending or debt needs. And it's our job to make sure that, their companies continue to progress. So that's what I've been doing since graduation, and I'm about 2 months out?
Sounds good. Thanks, Evan. And last but certainly not least, we have Mike Reid with us. Mike is in the entertainment industry. He has played the drums for Rihanna, Janet Jackson, Jay-Z, and Beyonce, and one of my favorites, Jill Scott. I promised I wouldn't tell the whole world that he didn't get me tickets to the Jill Scott concert, but I still love him. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Reid.
Hey, you all. Nice to meet you. Thanks, Izetta. I'm Mike Reid. Grew up here in Baltimore. I've been playing drums professionally for about 21 years now, since 13. I went to Switzerland when I was 13, and that kind of jump-started my career. And I'm the current live touring drummer for Janet Jackson. So honored to be here.
Thank you. Thank you all for being with us today. I think it's important that we set the stage and kind of before we go into the questions, as Eric mentioned earlier, we are in a post-pandemic, still pandemic, but as it relates to human resources practices, the virtual interviewing, virtual panel discussions, working with people from all over the country and not in the same place is kind of the way things are going. So even for anyone like Mike to Eric to myself, all different industries, but we're all trying to manage this virtual industry in different ways. So if you have a question, please feel free to put it in the question and answer box. Again, not the chat, but we'll start off with a question that I'm going to throw to Evan and to Micah first. So can you briefly describe how you prepared for your career pathway? And is that research different in a virtual setting than in a live setting? So we'll start with Evan.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it takes a little bit more planning up front when you're moving towards a virtual landscape when it comes to finding job opportunities. For me personally, prior to the pandemic, so much of that process was done through career fairs or done through events that you would see at your school. But once that ends up, once that dries up, you kind of have to go and dig a little bit more and use some of those online resources, places like LinkedIn or Glassdoor or similar types of websites to kind of find those opportunities. So to give a bit of backstory on how I ended up in my role, there was a virtual, essentially a virtual info session about the industry that I was in. And of course, this is a little bit easier when you're coming from the college route because this is kind of where they're targeting. But what happens with that is, you go to these virtual settings and that's the place where you have to show yourself and kind of sell yourself. And I think that's one of the bigger challenges about the transition is learning how to do that. So the entire, interview process for me coming into my current role was virtual. So that's, all of your interviews and all of that is done via the computer. And that's something that, is a little bit easier for someone who's used to doing things in a classroom setting online. But it does definitely take a bit more preparation ahead of time to kind of find opportunities when you're working virtually.
Great point. Thank you. So Micah, what's your take on your preparation in a virtual world?
So I was fortunate enough to not have to be in virtual when I was applying for all the jobs. So there were still in-person interviews and in-person job fairs when I applied for a job. But when I actually got the job and it started virtual, I was the first class of college students to start their job virtually. Nobody really knew how to handle that situation. And so what I had to start doing to myself is reaching out to people like on Slack, on email at my company who were kind of working in positions that I wanted to see myself in because I knew I wouldn't see them in the office, and having to put meetings on their schedule and then ask them for opportunities that I couldn't, like in the office space, you can walk by and kind of like see people, build up a repertoire. I didn't have that option. And so it's a lot of being intentional with your actions and reaching out to people that you really want to work with.
It's a great point. It's a great point. So Mike, in the world that you're in, which is all about that personal connection through music, how has the virtual nature of everything changed the way you progressed for your career?
Well, for me, it's a funny story that most of my relationships were based when I had a lot of my relationships younger when I met them a while ago. So, but I believe now it's definitely changed. Everything is changing because of social media, because of the platforms that we have now, versus you can become seen by putting something up online and you can get views out of nowhere if your content is good enough, if you really put yourself into that. So it's definitely changed. And I'm actually catching up now. I've been drumming live for the last 21 years. So now that everything has shifted, last year, March 2020, I had 2 tours lined up. I had Alicia Keys and I had Janet lined up, and both of those went away that fast because of the pandemic. So I had to immediately learn how to record myself from home. And it took me about 3 months, but once I got it, I wound up getting a call to do the Grammys 21 this year. And I recorded it from home and everything was virtually. So I would say everything has shifted and it's up to us. We really have to go with the times because I believe this is where things are moving at, the virtual experience.
Great. Well, congratulations on the Grammys. So Eric, a bit of a twist in the question. So you're a hiring manager. How does the virtual nature of all of this change when you're looking to hire someone?
Well, it's interesting. The candidate selection process was very similar. You would submit a resume, you'd submit a cover letter, we'd review that, and then select the interview candidates. What's hard, and we were talking a little bit about this earlier on, is doing the interview virtually, and I've been both interviewed and done an interview and interviewed, is, in person, you like to try and get a read off of a person, you kind of want to read body language, and that just does not come across in the virtual space. So that's just a kind of a little quirk to it. And also there's just that little bit of awkwardness with little glitches or little pauses, and you start to talk and then the camera breaks and then you kind of feel like you're talking over each other. So you just kind of have to work past that and get to the point where you understand that's just the nature of it. It's going to happen, and just don't let it bother you, and just pause for a second and let it go on. So yeah, the interview process was interesting. You didn't get a chance to shake a hand. You didn't get a chance to look somebody in the eye, so to speak. So that kind of makes that part of it a little more difficult, particularly if you're good at kind of getting a read on people from meeting them. You really can't do that as well virtually. So that was one of the big challenges. So you have to be very creative in your questions to try and pull out what you may not get from meeting in person.
Great point. Thank you for sharing that. So let's move to a bit of a different question. Can you speak to the importance of intention when mapping out your career development? That's a bit of a tricky one because what used to work in the past may not work nowadays. So I will throw this question out there. Let's first hear from Micah, because you touched a little bit on this when you were speaking earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's actually a really big one for me because I still at 23, I'm not quite sure what I want to do for the rest of my life, where I want to go. And thankfully I'm in a rotational program right now. And so I basically do over the next 2 years, I'll do a different job every 6 months. And so I'm in my second rotation right now. And in each rotation, I look at what I like to do, what I don't like to do, who is doing what I currently do. Do I like what they're doing 10 years after the fact? And I have to create notes to make sure that I figure out what the right path is for me based on doing these different 6-month rotations. And then also just making sure I meet with the higher ups and asking them what they did at the start of their career that kind of helped them build to where they are now, and making sure that I'm building the correct base for anything that I want to do, because I don't know what it is right now. And so I want to make sure I'm getting every single skill as possible in these different rotations to build a solid base for whatever I end up doing.
That's great. Anyone else want to comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for me personally, I graduated about 2 months ago, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm 22. So I'm also very much at the very early stages of a career. And to Micah's point, I think so much of it comes down to networking. I think one of the potential benefits of Zoom that I've noticed is it's actually quite a bit easier. Depending on the firm you're at, depending on the nature of it. If you're at a place that has a lot of different offices, usually you're kind of confined to who you're with physically. I think with Zoom, people are more inclined to take meetings with someone from a completely different office or a completely different background, just because of the nature of the beast. So I think something that's been really helpful for me personally is honestly kind of doing a lot of what Micah has said, is talking to people and kind of trying to get a better understanding of what the route that they're on actually looks like and how you get there. And I think a big part of it for me too is just being willing to be wrong. Throughout the internships I had in college, I think every single time the job I got ended up being a bit of a surprise. But what I paid attention to was that between all of them, there's these kind of tie lines of things that I knew that I wanted to experience, or things that I took away that I said, okay, this is something that I could see myself enjoying. So I think a lot of it too is just learning how to be honest with yourself about the type of environment you want to be in, and being willing to put yourself out there and kind of ask the questions that help you figure out if the place that you're at, the place that you're headed, aligns with it.
It's a very great point. Very good point. Thank you for sharing that. So we do have a question in the Q&A box, and I will read it out. Thank you, Rob Tolliver, for the question. After you develop good content, is there a proven way to increasing exposure and building a bigger audience? And I think this is aimed at Mike.
It just has, like you said, it has to be good content, and they have things online with hashtags and you can at people, their names, so you just make sure you put in the right hashtags, make sure your content is really good. I mean, look at what's getting the views and what's getting attraction, and if not match that, try to beat it. Because I'm it's a hard industry to keep up with, the media platform, because it changes every day. So much content is being created, but with the right hashtags and have a purpose in mind, whoever you have in mind that's doing what you like and that you want to go, or you have a goal in mind, try to find a way to tag them, or try to find a way to comment on their post, or just try to engage yourself in what they're doing online, because you never know, they may see what you're doing, because they definitely see the comments and things like that. So I would just say stay engaged and just make sure your content is really well thought out.
Great point. And I'll also comment for the non-entertainment kind of group, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs that do consulting, for instance, leadership development, or whatever your niche is. It's still important, if you're thinking about it in terms of, let's say, even LinkedIn, your content, your hashtags, same thing as Mike was saying, extremely important to make sure that you're putting out content that people want to see, that it's not just noise, because there's a lot of content out there. So make sure it's quality, make sure it's very targeted specifically to your audience. So you have to do your homework. You can't just put content out there, cross your fingers, and hope that the right person will come across it. Because what you inadvertently might be doing is putting out content that doesn't really represent you well. So I think that's very important from the entertainment side of it, which Mike gave you, and also from the professional side of it.
Your audience is very important. Your core, your audience, and you'll see the responses from people. They'll tell you if they like it or not. So if you've done something and it's doing good, keep jamming away at that. Keep chipping at it.
Yeah, I'd like to echo this as well. So one of the projects that I was actually working on was finding social media influencers to boost my company's brand awareness. And I had to do the hard work. I was looking at 40 different influencers. I was tracking their views, tracking their followers, tracking what kind of audience they have. And I would make sure that it aligns with our audience. And then I would make sure I was looking at how many views each video had. And then I would collect their highest viewed videos. So then I would say, hey, like, we need to build more content like this with our company's name attached to it, so we can build your followers, our followers, and increase my company's brand awareness. So again, doing your homework, making sure you're keeping charts of what's doing well, and then keeping up that kind of work.
Great. Thank you, Rob, for your question. So my next question I have here is, what's the best career advice you've ever been given? And I'd love to hear this from all of you all. So I'll start with Eric.
There's a couple, and this actually ties to the question of intention earlier. Follow your passion, not the paycheck, is one. Mm-hmm. A lot of people want to go for the money, and I've been in the automotive industry for over 25 years, and I can see what it looks like when it goes well, but more likely I see what it looks like when it goes bad. You have very unhappy people and family lives that just aren't what they want to be, because they're not doing what they really want to do. And that's something I had to learn. I spent a lot of time doing what I thought I was supposed to do, but not doing what I really wanted to do. And I'm, here at this stage of my career, really now just starting to get into the realm that I want to be in. So that's the first one. The second one I'll throw in as a bonus is know when to ask for help. So often we feel like we have to have the answer. And I promise you, it's better to say, I don't know, when you don't know, than try to come up with something and kind of, the phrase your way through it. So be willing to ask the questions, know what you don't know, and do your homework. And if you don't know it, it is what it is. That's fine. You'll get more respect for saying, I don't know, but I'll find out, than trying to come up with something.
Great point. Evan, what's your take?
I'd love to jump on that, because I actually saw that kind of play out firsthand in my time as an intern. So my internship kind of culminates around this central project where you're pitching the bank on a potential investment. And you give your presentation, and you have about 15 minutes of Q&A afterwards. And the difference in response and the difference in the way that something is received between someone who's willing to say, hey, I don't know, let me get back to you, that's a great question, and someone who's kind of trying to do what my dad was alluding to, which is faking your way through it. there's such a difference. And you could tell because the person who kind of went the route of trying to fake their way through it, well, they didn't get a return offer. And so that's something that, even myself, I've noticed even early on is knowing when to ask for help. And I think, well, one, I've definitely stolen those pieces of advice from my father, but another piece I kind of touched on earlier is this idea of being willing to be wrong. I think, coming into college, I wanted to be a lawyer. And then through talking to people about what that actually looks like and learning about what that industry really means, it's like, okay, maybe not. And then it kind of forces you to figure out, okay, what is it that I'm really looking for? What is it that I really want out of a career? And I think a lot of the times it's not a place that you would expect to be. I certainly didn't expect to be in the baking industry. I was against it when I came into college, but after just learning more and talking to more people, you realize, oh, this actually fulfills, the types of things I want out of a job. So at least early on in my career, at this point, I think just being willing to be wrong and self-aware has been really important.
Great, thank you. Micah.
Yeah. So one of the best pieces of advice that I've gotten is going above and beyond in whatever you do. There's a lot of people that you work with that are going to be doing what's asked of them, which is great. But the people that really get noticed, the people that do more than what's asked of them and go above and beyond. So the first thing you want to do is when you get an assignment or a project is ask, like, what do you want? What are the metrics? What am I supposed to be giving to you? And then immediately think about how you can surpass those expectations to impress everyone even more. And that goes along with what Eric was saying about being passionate about what you do, because if you are passionate about what you do, you're going to want to go above and beyond anyway. And I think that's so that these things kind of go twofold, like going above and beyond and being passionate, because that's what's going to give you the drive to really get there.
Great. Mike.
Yes, I wanted to piggyback off of what Eric said with the follow your passion and not the money, because I believe that's the difference between making a living and living a great life. Like when you follow your passion, you can actually live out things that you enjoy doing versus just making a living, a paycheck, really not feeling purposeful in what you're doing, which is to me the most important thing you can do is have purpose in whatever you're doing, because it makes you want to do it. It makes you want to get up. It makes you, excited about doing it. So, and not dwelling too much on the past. That's the best advice. I tend to used to dwell on a previous gig where I may have messed up, and that can add some fear to whatever. It's just sometimes it's just do it, and you got to forget. If something goes wrong, you just got to forget and just move forward. So that's the best advice. They just tell me this, hey man, just keep moving forward, man. Get them next time. You're not gonna win them all every time. So you're gonna have some good ones, but don't let the bad things that happen get you down and you dwell on that. Just kind of dump it and keep moving.
And a point that Micah made that I'd love to kind of to add on a little bit is, when you're talking about this idea of being passionate, a piece of advice that I got that I was guilty of early on was pick your head up. I think a lot of times, especially early in your career, it's really tempting to just bury your head in the work and just think that that's the way to really separate yourself. But at every stop that I've had, whether it be an internship or at this point, the thing that's really been the separator is being willing to talk and being willing to put yourself out there, because at the end of the day, people want to do business with people that they like. So of course the work's really important, but if that's all you're doing, it's going to be really hard to stand out. So the people aspect is also really important, especially in a virtual environment, because it takes that extra bit of effort to get there.
It's a very, very good point, Evan. One of the things that I share, I lead a team, virtual team actually, of learning consultants. We're in training and development. And one of the things that I see new employees do often that hurts them is really based on off of what you just said. They get in the role, head down, they're looking at their small little piece of whatever the project or the dirt or whatever it is they're doing. And I often have to say to them, I need you to stop. I need you to look up and I need you to look around, because what you're doing, yeah, that's your project. That's what I've assigned you to do, but it's not a silo. What you're doing affects what other people are doing. And if you're not connected to those other people, you're setting yourself up for failure. And I do think that that is a mistake. And it goes across no matter what age you are or how much experience you have. If you're not doing that, it's going to be a problem sooner rather than later. So thank you for sharing that. It's a great point.
Yeah, and on that point, I think that a lot of times in interviews, when you have your final round, you're on location interviewing, they have a lunch as well with some people that work there. And a lot of people take that opportunity to kind of talk themselves up more. And I would kind of shy away from that in that lunch setting, because that's kind of where they're seeing what your personality is. Can they work well with you? Do they like you? Do they want to work with you? And so instead of using that point to kind of toot your own horn, maybe use that to get to know the people you're going to be working with, and also evaluate if you like them and if you want to be working with them. Do you want to eat lunch with them every single day? And use that as more of an opportunity as a social setting instead of a business setting.
It's a great point. I think that's a hidden resource or tool that often is not used as it should be, which is essentially networking. And that's what I meant by looking up and looking around and figuring out what else is happening, how it's connected to what you're doing. But even if you want to think strategically about your career, about your development, you can't do that without the other people in the industry that you're working, or even at your own company, not necessarily external to your company, but all of those things matter. And in the virtual world, as we said before, it's even more difficult to network because you don't have the opportunity to be at the office, walking by somebody's, stairwell, and you run into them and you have a conversation. Or as it used to be when we were all, I worked for Merck, and we have a national headquarters here in Eastern Pennsylvania, where even if I wasn't working in the building, I could go for lunch and connect with at least 10, 15 different people between the time I got there, stood in line to get what I was getting, chatted up a couple of people, sat down with a couple more, and then walked out with even more. Those days are over because we're not allowed in the building right now. And if we are in the building, there are social distancing rules. We have to wear a mask the entire time we're on site. So it's a little difficult. That's a barrier to communication in a lot of ways, because not only is it a physical barrier, having to wear the mask, the space creates a barrier where it becomes almost a communication emotional barrier. You just don't even try to connect with people because of the physical barriers. So this virtual, whatever you have, MS Teams, WebEx, whatever method that's available to you, even some people, like I've been connecting with Instagram video to some folks. Whatever means are available, I think we should be using all of them, because things are changing really quickly. So let's switch gears a little bit. I've got a question for you all, and it kind of runs right into what we were just talking about. So what tools, apps, or sites do you use to help secure a position or a gig or an appointment with somebody that you want to network with? And I'll start with Eric.
So I may not be the best one for this question, only because with Ford, the majority of the hiring that I do or that we do is internal. And we actually have a completely separate organization, very similar to what Micah and Evan are experiencing, where they're in like college graduate programs. Ford has that as well. And there's a whole separate group that handles that. And that's done through college recruiting. I'm not, now it's obviously virtual college recruiting. But that's where a lot of the new hiring comes in. Beyond that, most of the hiring we do beyond the initial hire coming to the company new is going to be internal candidates. On that front, we have what we call PDC 5 reps, or every group has somebody they can go to saying, hey, what opportunities are out there? So it really goes down to owning your career. What opportunities are out there? What areas am I interested in? One thing that I've used is doing informational interviews. If there's an area I think I'm interested in, I'll get with one of the managers and say, hey, I'd like to sit down and talk about your area and maybe see where there might be an opportunity for a fit for me. And that's actually gotten me a couple positions. So you definitely have to own your career. You definitely have to, again, going back to that passion, knowing what it is you like to do, knowing it is what you want to do, and be willing to go out and ask people and put your face out there and let them know, hey, I'm interested. And you may not get something right away, but then they know that this person was interested and they see you around, they kind of keep an eye on you. So from a corporate standpoint, which is where I come from, that's probably the advice I would give.
Anyone else? What tools, apps, et cetera, sites do you use?
Sure. For me, I can kind of give the once you're in offer, answer and beforehand. I think beforehand it's back to LinkedIn is a really big part of it. They have a really robust kind of search system that allows you to search not only by school but by company. You can base it off of if they're from your hometown. Getting in the weeds of that app is really helpful because you'd be surprised about how many people are willing to have that informational interview with you, even if they're not part of the company that you're trying to work with, just to kind of get more information. And for me personally, once I kind of entered roles that were virtual, it does get down to what my dad was talking about previously, which is being willing to own your career and putting time on people's calendars and making yourself known. I think especially early on, something that was kind of drilled into our heads was the most important thing that isn't necessarily, the work you do is obviously important, but what's more important is the people who know who you are. And so your network is your net worth is a phrase we hear a lot. And I think that really applies when you're kind of starting out your career. So if you're in college, I would definitely see if your school has Handshake. Handshake is another website and app that's been really helpful. A lot of my internships, a lot of my opportunities came from that. They will post things directly there, specifically made for people in college. So those are great places to look. If your college has a career advancement office, use it. They are immensely helpful. All of my internships in some way, shape, or form came from that. So I think a lot of it is, depending on where you are, just trying to, take stock of what kind of opportunities there are and be willing to put yourself out there and use them.
Yeah, definitely echoing Evan. Your school's career services are great. That's also how I got my job. And then LinkedIn is a great resource. Some other tips for LinkedIn is that if you know where you want to work, I would look at the hiring manager of that company and see like what they posted, because they could post links to jobs or job offerings on their own LinkedIn page and possibly like reaching out to them or something to see if they are interested in working with you. But a lot of jobs that are not actually posted on the jobs website or on Indeed or anything. So it's really important to try to actually go in and search for the jobs you're looking for through LinkedIn and like through the company's website.
And I wanted to add on to that. If for entertainers, studio engineers, sound engineers, anybody in the arts, there's an app called Jamcard, JMMCARD. And that's for all music professionals and audio engineers, anything. It's a very great site to connect with different artists on. Quincy Jones is on there. It's a really amazing app. So if you're an entertainer or in that business, I would say look into getting on the app Jamcard.
Okay. So Mike, while I have you, there's a question that was geared towards you, and it has specifically to do with your career as a musician. So the question is, how do you balance your career as a musician professionally with serving your congregation?
At church, well, every time I'm home, that's where I'm at. Like I said, it's tiring. It takes a lot out of you. I'll just like a few weeks ago, I was in France and I flew home on that Saturday and I was in church the next day. But like, it's easy for me because serving for my congregation is first. That's like my true passion to worship and that's just me. So when I'm out there doing gigs and things, I think that's really, it's my job. That's another section. So I just kind of compartmentalize the different things. I kind of categorize it, so I never let any, weigh the other. And sometimes if it gets too hard on either, I'll take a little break, like a week or two off. So it's important to take some time to yourself, and when you have free time, make sure we live in a world where sometimes we think it's not okay to take a second to ourselves, to breathe and to be like, you know what, I always got to be on it. I always got to be doing this. If you have an evening off, read or something, or do a hobby or do something different. So for me, mentally, that's what helped me to balance everything, because when I have time off, I take time. But when it's work time is go time. But when I have that time off, I really take time to myself.
That's important. I thank you for bringing that up. I think that that's something that all of us who are in the professional world, no matter what we're doing, need to heed that advice, that mental health is important. And then we've seen that play out over the last several weeks during the Olympics. And it's wonderful to speak about it. And I love the fact that the National Association speaks about it as well, that mental health is an important component of keeping everybody healthy. So thank you for sharing that. We have a couple of questions in the Q&A that I'll pause and ask. The first from Desi Smith: can outside employers post on Handshake? Does anybody know?
I'm assuming you mean in the sense of like outside of your organization. So I can speak to what the experience was for me using Handshake. So essentially the way it worked was, you kind of check, it almost was like a job listing app where you would kind of go and check and see what types of opportunities were available. There would be events, sometimes there'd be direct job applications, and you kind of scour it and just look for things that kind of align with what it is you're looking for. So yeah, as far as the organizations that post on it, it's kind of runs the gamut as far as where the opportunities might come from.
Great. I'm going to ask Micah, if you can, the question is, can we add the apps that we were speaking about to the chat? So can you chat in the apps that we've been talking about, Handshake and LinkedIn, all of that stuff for the folks?
Yeah, I'll look for the links and then I'll add them to the chat.
Thank you. Okay, let's move along. We've got about 20 minutes left, and I have a bunch of questions, apparently. This is a good discussion, so thank you all for the engagement, and thank you to the audience for your engagement. And I'll remind you to please place your questions in the Q&A queue versus the chat. I really don't want to lose them, and I want to make sure that we get everybody's questions answered. Okay, so the next question is, how do you define success as a Christian versus kind of how non-Christians might define success? And what's the biggest challenge to your drive for success? So Evan, I'll start with you on that question.
That's a heavy question, but
yes,
I
it's
think,
very heady.
Yeah. I think for me, it's understanding the difference, and this is something that I've talked about a little bit before, but I don't think it's necessarily healthy to attach, anything monetary to success. I think that success is more so of a product of fulfillment. It's more so a product of working in what your gifting is, and so I think personally, regardless of the role, regardless of the paycheck, I think the first question I ask myself is this something that aligns with what I've been gifted to do by God? And if it does, then I feel like I'm in the right spot. Obviously, that's challenging working in an environment, especially in the finance field, where the focus of what you're around is money. But just through, I think, being around that environment, you learn very quickly that by no means is a guarantee of happiness. It's by no means a guarantee that you're going to be having a good life at home. And in fact, most people that I know who are of great means are also of great struggles internally. So I think it's really important to focus more so on internal fulfillment for your success and fulfillment towards the glory of God versus just how much money you're making at your job.
Yeah. In the words of the great theologian, Big Papa Biggie, more money, more problems.
I thought you would go somewhere very deep.
I saw that one coming.
That is true.
I'll kind of piggyback off what Evan said, and I'll be churchy for a minute, but the Bible tells us whatever we do, whether in word or deed, do it as unto the Lord, and that's really simple, basic advice. The whatever means whatever, and serving God is certainly not limited to just being in the church setting. God needs his people in the boardrooms, in the banks, in the athletic fields, in the concert halls. He needs us in those places because that's where we need to be to connect with people and to be able to represent him and be able to show what it's like to be a professional and at the same time live for Christ. And a lot of people don't think that those two can go together, but they absolutely can. So I think that's kind of the big thing is whatever you do, make sure you're one, honoring God with it, two, honoring yourself, and then put your heart into it.
Great point. And I do think that there is, especially when you're young in your career, there is the struggle. If you brought up, like most of us were as Christians in Christian households, there's that struggle. Like I used to really struggle with, am I really doing ministry if I'm doing it outside of the church? Like, is my job separate from my ministry, or are they all together? And as I think I've evolved as an adult, I've come to understand that, as to your point, Eric, God needs all of us. The Bible shares with us that he's gifted us all differently so that there's betterment for the entire body, and that the finger is not any more important than the thumb, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it takes all of us to push forward the kingdom principles and the things that need to be done for the kingdom. And I've since come to the conclusion that without each one of us, without my job in corporate America, without my ability to share what gifts I have and share monetarily with projects that the church is involved with, that I think that I understand that is ministry. That's what I'm called to do. It's not called what somebody else is called to do, but that's what I'm called to do. So thank you for sharing that. Does anybody else want to touch on that? What does success look like for you as a Christian?
Well, I'll say success for me is, like I said, I keep mentioning the purpose word. That's just one of the most important things I've been focused on, because doing things in the world and playing for different type of artists, I noticed there's really no amount of money that could really make you happy. I've seen people that are, you know, so wealthy and just not happy. So it kind of made me rethink what success was. And then I was like, I'm really doing what I've been doing since I've been a kid. And I really get to travel to do that, you know. So to me, and I get to keep my lights on and pay bills doing what I love, what I actually love to do, what I would be doing if I wasn't even getting paid for it. So to me, that was success, when I was able to follow my passion and feel like I was living a purpose-filled life and reaching others through my gift and being able to connect with people and being out there, share, you know, be myself, you know, not let it get to me and not let it dilute my head, and really people can see the way you live and be like, man, what's different about you? And then that's the invitation to share about the Lord to them. So I'm just saying, to me, that was purpose filled. And a couple of years ago, I came back home and I did a conference in Baltimore, and I was able to speak to kids, and I was able to, and that all came from me being able to do gigs and to do what I was called to do. So it all kind of worked together. So to me, that was success in my eyes. Not that I had, you know, I was making millions of dollars from doing a big conference at a convention center or something like that, but it was just like I could touch kids' lives just by talking to them. So to me, now in the world, it may be being on a boat, a yacht, you know, having money thrown it. That may be success to them, but not for me. So I kind of rethought what success is to me. And for me is that I'm helping someone else. To me,
that's a blessing. Thank you. We do have a question that came up, Mike. What was the organization or the site that you said that you should be, if you're in the entertainment world, that you should be on? That was the question. I think Sister Linda missed that. Yes. And the question also, in addition to what the site is that good for people who do voiceovers, or is it specific to musicians?
No, it's singers, many singers are on there, background vocals, BGVs. I say check it out. It's called Jam Card. JAMM. I could put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
We got that one answered. So with the time that we have left, I have two final questions. And I'll ask Eric, I'll ask you this one. What are the most important professional skills that we should have?
I think some of the most important professional skills are actually what I would call the soft skills. One is flexibility. In the professional world, you need to be able, and Evan kind of touched on this on the willing to be wrong, you need to be able to pivot when you find what you're looking at or what you're going for is not the right answer. Too many times I think people, in an effort to be right, focus on a bad decision or focus on a bad plan instead of stopping, pausing, and realizing, nope, this is going the wrong way. I need to pivot and go into another direction.
Mm-hmm.
Self-awareness too, again, these are like the soft skills. Self-awareness is another big one. Knowing your limits and also knowing your strengths. A lot of times we talk about knowing your limits and when to ask questions, but also know your strengths and when to use them and when to speak up for yourself and advocate for yourself. That goes a very, very, very long way. A lot of the technical skills, spreadsheets, databases, all that stuff, that can be taught. You can learn that, but those other softer skills, that's hard for a company to teach you. Those are things you have to own for yourself and take ownership of yourself in your career. So I know it may not be quite what you were looking for, but what I have seen, at least in my experience, is people that own those skills and have those skills down, they're happier and they're more successful in that they're doing what they love and they're able to do well at it and know when it's time to move on and do something different, which we haven't gotten to that really or talked about that, but sometimes.
Well, go ahead, let's talk about it.
Yeah, sometimes the good skill is to know when to say, this isn't for me. And it goes to kind of several questions that came up, even the one about ministry and work and tying that all together. There are times when you may have to say, this isn't for me and I need to do something different and prioritize yourself and your well-being and your integrity over the paycheck. So those are kind of really critical skills and those apply in any industry. They're not limited to one type of work or anything like that, from athletes to musicians to bankers to lawyers to whatever it is you're doing, those will all apply.
Great. Micah, same question to you. What professional skills do you think are that should we have?
I think that communication is like the main thing, and that's kind of a lot, like, again, like you asking for help, being able to talk to different people across different parts of the company in order to do whatever you have to do. I think a lot of people think that they can do things by themselves. They don't need to talk to people. They can kind of pull in and work. And I think a lot of what I do, or a lot of what a lot of people are going to do when they're in a company or business, is talking to other people and knowing how to get important information from people they need it from, or things like that. So I think communication is the best skill that anyone can have while working in a company.
What about you, Evan?
I really like to echo this, that the soft skills really do play, I think, the biggest role, and kind of piggyback off the points that have been made. I had a boss at one of my first real internships who had been in the industry for a long time and became a bit of a mentor of mine. And at a certain point, he sat me down. He pulled out an index card from his wallet that he's had for about 20 years. And on that index card, he has written all the goals that he set out for himself when he was, entering his career and starting out college. And he really encouraged me to do the same. And this kind of goes to the point that my dad made earlier about knowing when you're in the right place or not. He kind of, before entering his role, set the type of person he wanted to be, the type of impact he wanted to have, the type of goals he had. And this was also a Christian man in this industry. So a lot of it too was he wanted to make sure he was ministering properly through his role. And so throughout his career, he kind of assessed where he was based on this index card. And seeing, does this really still align with where I think I'm supposed to be, where I think I'm called to be? And maybe this isn't the answer to the question directly, but I do think
it is.
A big part of it is just kind of finding some sort of North Star for yourself and judging what's going on in your career based off of what you think that North Star should be.
Great point. Mike, do you want to add? What skills do you think are necessary?
Yeah, kind of what Micah, we all were saying. it's a people game. Very simple. It's people. So if you're good at connecting with people, if you can connect with people, it just works like that. You meet this person, you meet that person tells that person, and being a good person and just connecting with people, for me, it's always been a people game. I
It's a
mean,
great point.
everything else is good, the technology, everything we have, but it's still connecting with a person on
Yeah.
platform.
So there's a book, I can't think of the author, but the name of the title is Everybody Communicates, but Few People Connect. And I actually had my entire team read it earlier this year, and we did a whole discussion debrief of it, because I see that often, that people want to be heard, and they think that somehow if they keep talking and they talk louder than everybody else, that that's going to work, and it never does. And I agree with all of you all. It's about connection. And if you're not communicating to connect, you're just making noise. And I see that often. And that goes for live meetings when you're in discourse with the human being, or if you're placing content, same thing. Why are you placing the content? You're placing it to connect with an audience. And if you're not connecting with an audience, you're contributing to junk on the internet. So great point. And it's time for our last question. And I'd love to hear each one of your responses. So I will start where we left off with Mike. Mike, what advice would you give your younger self related to a career and preparation for that career?
Well, I'll kind of just say a quick story. Well, a few years back, I had an idea to start a virtual reality kind of like a thing where it would be circumstantial. So, say you had a hard time coming up making choices.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was kind of like a virtual therapy thing. So I wanted it to, you would basically have a couple choices, or say you're in a car accident or something bad, would be like, what do you wish you would have done? Or what just what if questions, kind of like to kind of push you into challenges. So I told one of my therapist friends, and she said, they're already doing that. Blah, 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 blah. So that kind of suppressed my dream. And this was a few years back. So what I would say, if you have any ideas, kind of just follow through. And I would tell my younger self never to let anybody else perception off of what they thought about my dreams or my ideas. Kind of just follow through with your own goals, because it was unique to you. If God gives you a download, that's your download. It may not be for everybody else to understand that download that he gave specifically to you. So I would say just follow through with whatever God gives you. It may work, it may not, but at least try. So I would tell my younger self to try my downloads.
I love it. Evan, what advice would you give yourself?
I think it would be to focus on the destination and stop worrying about the route. I think especially kind of coming into college, figuring out where I wanted to go, figuring out what route I wanted to go. I had an idea in mind of what I thought, God was leading me towards. And I put a lot of effort into figuring out every step to that. And every time I tried to do that, I ended up somewhere completely different than what I would have expected. And so I think now it's learning to understand that, I'm not going to know the route that God has for me. But I can trust that so long as I feel like I'm acting within my purpose, so long as I feel like I'm kind of aligned with him every step of the way, I'm going to end up where I'm supposed to. And my job is just to maximize whatever situation I'm in the moment. So trying to be more focused on the moment and less focused about what's next has been very helpful for me.
That's a good one. That's a very good one. Micah, what's your advice to your younger self?
I would definitely tell them to not be too freaked out about not knowing what you want to do with the rest of your life. I think once you're like 18, 19, 20, 21, everyone's like, oh my God, everyone seems like they have it all together, and you seem like you're kind of drowning because you have no idea what you want to do. And so you're out doing all these different things. And like no one really knows what they're doing. Even now at work, no one really knows what they're doing. So it's okay to not know. I would also tell my younger self to take advantage of every single opportunity that comes their way. Like looking back, there are times where I would be like, oh, this deadline's in one day, I'm just not going to do it, or oh, that looks like too much work, I'm not going to do that. And then I would look back saying, man, I wish I studied abroad that one time, man, I wish I like applied for that board position and was like working with that organization, things like that. So just because you're like daunted by approaching deadline, or like you think something's gonna be too much for you, you will be able to handle it, and you're going to look back wishing that you took up that opportunity that you missed.
Good advice. Eric?
I'm going to piggyback a little bit off of what Micah said, Nevin, too, is, when you're starting off trying to figure out what it is you want to do, don't get caught in the trap of doing what you think you're supposed to do.
Oh, good.
Follow, and that's what I did for a good bit of my career, was I did what I thought I was supposed to do. You want to follow your passion, follow what you want to do. And if that means changing courses here and there, that's perfectly fine. When you get into college, don't expect, I'm going in, I'm going to major in this. You're going to change your major. And that's perfectly okay. That's what college is for. The purpose is to take classes and to learn things and get experiences you didn't have that will open your eyes to a broader world than what you've experienced up to that point. So allow yourself to take it in, allow yourself to see the different opportunities, and just keep honing in on the things that really bring passion, that really drive you to do. Like, I really like this, and just keep going after it, and allow yourself to be kind of steered along the way by your experiences. And you'll be way happier, and you'll find yourself doing kind of like Mike said, I do what I love. I've been doing it since I was 13. That's what you want to do.
That's good. You guys have given great advice, great commentary. I think that this has been a very beneficial hour for us. I can't believe our hour together is up, but I want to say thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your journey and being transparent with our audience and with each other. I can't thank you enough. Also, thank you to the National Association again, to Pastor Cliff McDowell, and to Reverend Chucky Myricks, but a special thank you to Pastor Cynthia Thomas, who helped me do the research to prepare for this panel and gave encouragement about us doing it. Special thank you to the Empowerment Generation Development Corporation, Joshua Generations, Aunt Beverly Alford, who has been a consistent supporter of ours and has also pushed us to do better and to be better. So again, thank you all for joining us. Please stay tuned this evening, 7:30, for a wonderful evening service, Saturday evening service with pastors, plural. Ronald Fowler I and Ronald Fowler II are going to be with us this evening at 7:30. There are multiple ways to give to the National Association, and I encourage you, I challenge the members, so-called Joshua Generation crew, anybody who is Gen X and below, to give to the National Association. You can use Cashapp or Givelifiy, or go on site at the NACOG.com and give there. And you can also use PayPal, or if you're old school, you can simply do a money order or a check and mail it to Zions Hill in West Middlesex. Thank you again for joining us. This has been recorded. It will be posted on YouTube. So use this as one of the resources in your career development search. If you're thinking about changing your career, or if you need to interview virtually or live, you can always go back to the YouTube National Association site and view this again in preparation as part of your homework. Again, thank you. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you all again soon.